was asked to talk about future of L&D in a rapidly changing world. And when I was thinking about it, it reminded me of a session I attended a few months back, and it's what we call as knowledge sharing. So like-minded L&D leaders from the industry get together, talk about what's happening in their organizations. We discuss about what problems we are facing and try to peer learn. That's the whole model of that conference. It's a 2-day conference that happens annually. And we were talking about technology and AI. And in one of the discussions, someone said, will we have a job a few years later? And that was such an overwhelming question, because as everyone was talking about different tools and technologies, this individual was so overwhelmed that it brought up that fear of saying, will I even exist? Will L&D as a division exist in organizations? And I think that's the premise when I talk about future. And I don't want to talk about, obviously it's a technology, AI-based conference, but what I want to redirect the attention is to L&D in itself and start with that premise of why does L&D exist? L&D doesn't exist for you, me, academia. It exists for a purpose in every organization, and that is to drive business performance. And as long as that problem statement exists, there will always be a need for L&D, right? It's not going to go away. So I want to spend the next 30 minutes that we have together to just reflect on L&D as professionals, as us. And what is it that was changing, and how do we prepare ourselves to make sure that we are part of that change that's coming across, right? And when we think about it, it starts from the strategic influencers. Remember, the end, the big picture is the organization. So what influences anything we do in the L&D world starts from organizational strategy, right? And who defines the organizational strategy? The drivers. They are your leadership, right? Now, the second element is the industry landscape. I remember, and okay, this is a very funny contradiction of my life. I'm academically a techie, so I did my master's in computer applications some 20 years ago. And at that time, I chose not to go into the technology world because the starting point is a programmer. And when I graduated, the program coding languages that I learned were kind of non-existent. You had to learn something new before you were even allowed to interview for a new role. So I think I learned something called COBOL, C, C++. I don't think we use them anymore, right? And by the time I graduated, COBOL was nowhere there in the industry. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. I have to learn a new coding language every few months. It's going to be a very painful process. And then I shifted careers, or I picked up a job which was much more easier. And today, in the L&D world, I think I've been here for 8 years, and the funny bit is I think I've spent more time upskilling myself than I ever thought I would. I've just got off completing 2 back-to-back masters, and I'm like, oh, I'm tired. But I'm sure I'll have to get on to the next wave of what I need to do for myself to be relevant for the industry. Right? So that's what defines the skills, that's the driver. The third element is the digital transformation. Whether we like it or not, it is going to stay. But what happens is, when we hear all the fancy things and the buzzwords and the hype words of technology, we forget the driver is the systems. And the systems, not what's available in the industry. Systems from your organizational perspective. And I think if you keep all of this in mind, with the broad perspective of organizational strategy, you will start things coming to life, which is your L&D strategy and giving some of the things that everyone wants from us, right? L&D is often called as very reactive. By the time we come to solving the problem, the solution is irrelevant. So everyone wants learning in the flow of work. I don't want to step out, sit in an 8-hour full-day training workshop and learn something, and then go back and then I forget because I have burning business problems to solve for, right? I'll give you an example. I worked in pricing analytics, competitive pricing. So how many of you shop on Amazon? Everyone, right? I used to support North America region for Amazon with their pricing for all products that are available on the catalog. So you can imagine how high pressured that role would be. And I remember on a Saturday morning, I got a call from one of my counterparts in US, 8 o'clock India time, saying, Deepti, the prices are reflecting incorrectly. So a $400 product was showing up as $40 because something in the algorithm failed. We used to use machine learning back then because it's a scaling solution. And I don't think any people manager, despite learning all emotional intelligence, caring, empathy, at that point, it is a burning problem because Amazon had this, I think they still have this rule, whatever's the price on the website, if you buy it on that price, irrespective of it, they will honor it. So can you imagine if someone ends up buying a $400 product for $40? The loss to the organization. In a classroom environment, you will talk about empathy, the right way to give feedback. But in that moment, can you make it happen? Who's going to remember all the L&D fancy trainings that we did? Psychometric, personality. Nobody's going to remember it because you are going to just say, let's solve this problem right now. Which means waking up everyone out of bed on a Saturday and saying, I don't care what family issues you have, get to work, we need to make this work, we need to get the prices reflecting correctly, right? And that's where the need is learning in the flow of work. How do I help you apply the concepts, bring them to life while you are at your seat without having to step away? And that will stick irrespective of the stressful environment, which is our work environment every day, right? How do I make that happen? The expectation from business leaders, and I think this is where it is extremely powerful with the world of technology, evidence-based L&D. Everyone talks about, oh, we did this great program. We had 100 people who participated. They gave amazing feedback. We have also these whole verbatim feedbacks which we post as recommendations. But does that make sense to the business? What is your business looking for? There is some way to measure the performance, right? Simply put, it could be the profitability of the business. Is your L&D program talking about profitability? How a manager development program connects to improve performance, which drives the performance or profitability of your business? So how do we do that? How do we talk the language of the business and move away from talking L&D feedback in L&D language? Okay, all of you are going to hate me, but I'll say it anyways, is when we present data, L&D data, one of the biggest struggles, and I have had this from business leaders very often is, Deepti, you're preparing the data which speaks L&D. Can you prepare data which makes sense to me on the other side of the table? If you say I've put someone through this program on change management, how are you measuring that they've effectively managed change? Don't tell me how many people attended or what's the feedback or I measured behavior offline at a given point in time through a survey. No, can you measure them in the flow of work, right? And technology, thankfully, is going to do all of that for us. But the big question, so now I've aligned the strategy, I've aligned to the organization, maybe I put in some effort to also understand what my business does so I can talk that language, but the biggest gap is our own readiness. Are we even ready to take this on? How many of you are very confident about your data skills? How many of you are very confident that give me some data and I can present it, not Excel files, not pivots, but as insightful, meaningful analytics which will make sense to the business leaders? We are not. So if you have even the best generative AI tools or any kind of analytical tools, will you be able to use them? And that's where we have to make a shift. And the readiness is equipping ourselves with digital skills. There are lots of tools in the market, but go back, what is your organization trying to achieve? If you are in a journey where your organization is not yet ready to take on all the AI, technology, digital transformation that you want to bring in as L&D, even if you recommend, your business is not going to sponsor it. Or even if they sponsor, it will fail. For example, I was working for an organization and they wanted to move towards agile way of project management. So they worked with this big fancy consulting company, a huge $1 million project. They put in like hundreds of people across multiple locations through agile training. Brilliant. Now came the aspect of saying, how do I show ROI, right? So everyone had to pick up projects, run them the agile way, quickly show the iterations, and do all the process. So conceptually, everyone understands the Scrum process, the iterative process. But the basic was missing, which is what kind of a project works well in an agile world? What kind of a project should still continue as a waterfall model? So while everyone wanted to bring that transformation of agile approach, it would not process itself. The process didn't work the way it was supposed to work. How could L&D contribute there? You should understand, how do I contribute into that role? Doesn't mean you have to go and learn every technology, but do you understand how do you make the narrative fit, right? If you can't, it's a challenge. Psychometric assessments. How many of you use psychometric assessments in your organization? Do they really work? Why? You find something which appeals to you or your leadership, but does it fit the organization? Is there a need in the organization for psychometrics? So think about that. The other aspect is data and analytics, and I cannot emphasize enough on this. You want budget, sponsorships, you want to sell your story, you want to showcase the problem as a burning problem, you need to know your data. And not L&D data, the data for the business problem. I've worked in different industry domains, from retail, insurance, sourcing. And I was in sourcing, and I had this very interesting question because I was asked to do a career pathing project, career progression. So doing a career progression mapping from level 1 to the highest level someone could grow internally in the organization. And so I was sitting in there, and I was presenting the first segment for one of the job roles. So I had used the agile methodology, and we said we will touch one particular aspect. So we touched the quality team, we rephrased that whole career progression, and we said if this works, we kind of cascade. So it's called proof of concept in the agile world. And I had a very cheeky general manager when I was presenting. He's like, Deepti, this is all great. Can you so there were different job titles, and they said, can you explain to me what's the difference between this job title and this job title? So they were checking my knowledge about the domain, and the question is, if you don't know and you can't really articulate that, you might have the best solution, but they're not going to buy it. So L&D is not a desk job, it's a field job. Get out, observe people, shadow people on their jobs to know what they're doing. And that's when your data will come to life. Can you then analyze it? Can you really explain the problem? And then you apply the Pareto principle so that you have your effort in the right direction. Performance, I can't emphasize enough. L&D exists for organizational performance. You might have the fanciest of programs, but if they don't talk to improving organizational performance, you lose credibility as an L&D team. And probably that's why everyone's like, oh, L&D. I don't think a lot has changed from when I knew on the other side of the table of what L&D did. I'm sure quite a few of them like, I'm personally interested, I might be motivated, but as an organizational effort, it has to talk to this. What will change? My personal motivation and organizational motivation has to match, and it has to talk to performance. Changing roles. Traditional roles in L&D have changed, right? They no longer are around. I think we started somewhere with a trainer, and today we have so many roles, from UX designers to content designers, instructional designers, learning experience designers. You have AI learning experience. Are we mentally ready, irrespective of the job title, are we ready for that shift? Do we really understand? I think COVID was a classic way where we had to learn to move from classroom to virtual, and then learn skills about how do I make sure everyone's interacting in that virtual world? How is everyone engaged? And in a world where the moment you start sharing your screen, everyone goes off camera. You don't even know they're sitting there and listening to you, or have they disappeared, or they're just working on their emails because they need attendance to say, I've attended this training program. We've still not mastered that. Now throw into that mix AI. You will have someone say, why should I even come for your program? I'll just use generative AI and figure out what I need to learn. How do you even answer that? So it goes back to saying, do we align mentally ourselves, our mindsets to that role? The most important element is future readiness. L&D plays a role on making sure that within the organization, we are building capability for the organization, future-ready roles, right? As L&D, if you want to get proactive, we start working backwards from where the organization wants to get in the next few years. We start building that capability today. But in that process, do we upskill ourselves? Has anyone upskilled themselves in the last 6 months? Learned something new? Good, but fewer hands, right? We are L&D. And if you can't, stand up and follow what you're saying someone else to do, you're going to not have that credibility. And I'm not talking about certifications. I am not talking about courses. What I'm saying is, what is that you are learning for yourself? Building that skill sets. And most importantly, start thinking about scaling solutions. Look at where can I use technology to reduce my admin workload. Data, reporting, logistics, all of that can be scaled and moved out. So you spend more time on strategic elements. You spend more time where you have to research, find the right fit, build the narrative, make sure you're answering the business problems for the organization. But it all comes down, the L&D success in the future, at least that's my own view and my experience in the industry, is our own readiness to take it on. And if you want to take it head on, you want to be happy, successful in the L&D space, unlike my previous notion, you will have to keep learning. That doesn't stop. But learn from an organizational context so you're able to give back and be relevant in the organization and the role that you are working in. That's where the highest value lies. So on that note, thank you everyone for listening to me.